Around a decade ago, McLaren expanded its lineup with a new entry-level model called the 570S. It was a little bit cheaper than the 650S, and they continued to build derivatives of that car, including a Spider with an open-top roof and the more track-focused 600 LT. But fast forward 10 years to where we are today with this car, the 2025 McLaren Artura Spider. Now, the Artura actually launched a couple of years ago, but now they've introduced a Spider version with a convertible roof. And McLaren loves to do this. They love to release a Spider just a couple years after the coupe, but they did a lot more than just cut the roof off. They actually made a ton of enhancements to this car, including a power upgrade, which we'll talk about later on in this video. Now, the McLaren Artura is a special vehicle for McLaren because this is actually their first road car that does not use a V8 engine. Even the 570S that preceded it did have a V8, but this one actually has a new twin turbocharged V6 plus a hybrid system. That's right, McLaren's hypercar technology from the P1 has now trickled down to a much more affordable level. Does that make this the ultimate McLaren? Let's find out. Now let's start off with an exterior walk around where just because this is less expensive than the current 750S does not mean that the Artura Spider does not have those classic McLaren supercar looks. In fact, I somehow think this actually looks a little bit sharper and a little bit meaner here at the front. It has a little bit of the 650S in it, which honestly I think might be McLaren's prettiest like non-hypercar. The P1 is obviously quite gorgeous, but I think the Artura Spider just looks so good. You have kind of these sharp eyes that look really good. You just have this little kind of black area down here on the lower valence, very similar to what you got on the old 600 LT. A lot of good elements from previous McLarens here. I'm also adoring this color. It's called Papaya Spark. It is one of McLaren's MSO colors from their kind of specialty collection. $9,500 if you want to go ahead and option that. So it is quite a pricey option. We also have some optional black wheels here with the nice matching orange brake calipers. I really like how that goes with the orange here on this car. You can get a new 10-spoke wheel on this car, but we have a little bit of a different spoke pattern here on our tester. And I should also mention that these are wrapped in a Pirelli P0 tire that is meant to reduce road noise. So this is an interesting thing. As we get it out on the road, I'll be talking a lot about how the Artura Spider is a really quiet and comfortable supercar. It does pick up kind of some rocks and stuff like that. The inner lining isn't super well padded, but the tire itself really doesn't emit a lot of a noise, which is really nice as well. So we've got a 19-inch wheel at the front, size 235, and then back here we have a much fatter tire, a 295/20. So we do have staggered tires here on the Artura Spider. This thing just looks so good in side profile. I did mention that this is the Spider version. So something that McLaren typically does with all of its convertibles is you can't see the engine here on the convertible models, but you do get these really cool buttresses that are actually kind of see-through, helps with your visibility here. The roof is very quick. It goes down in just 11 seconds at speeds of up to 31 miles per hour. We actually have a new key fob here, different from what I've seen in previous generations of the McLaren. They've changed the key fob here. You actually can put the roof down from the key fob if you just hold the unlock button. You can see that it'll tuck away in the little storage area. And then the area with the buttresses will come down, the windows will go up, and now we have a roofless car. So I really do like that. I think that especially when viewed here from the back, that the Artura Spider is actually even better looking than the coupe, which is already a good looking car. God, that tail end, the way that that kind of is shaped back here. We don't have a spoiler. We just have kind of like a fixed rear end here, which I actually kind of like. It kind of adds to the understatedness of this car. I mean, the Papaya Spark paint kind of ruins that, but it is a little bit more subtle, and it does look like the P1, the way that this thing is shaped. We've got our dual exhaust. We do have a $5,500 sport exhaust here. Here in the middle, we've got the McLaren logo with the badge for Artura. If you're wondering where the name Artura comes from, I believe it's named after King Arthur, which makes sense because this is a British car, and I think that is a really cool thing to name it after. King Arthur, obviously a very epic character, very big amounts of lore surrounding King Arthur. And the car itself is a little bit smaller than a 750S. You've got a little over an inch less from bumper to bumper than you do on the 750S. So this thing is pretty decently small, although I did try to park it earlier in my one-car garage, and it is quite wide. So you might want to check that out, although I don't know how many people that are buying an Artura Spider only have a one-car garage, but who knows? Maybe you live in LA. A lot of LA houses cost millions of dollars, but still only have a one-car garage. Also, my heart goes out to anybody that lost their home in the recent LA fires. I really hope that you're able to get the help you need on that. Now that we've looked at the outside of the Artura, let's spend a little bit of time here on the inside. Of course, we still have the dihedral doors. This has been a staple for McLaren since it started building road cars back with the MP412C. So I like to see that even the Artura, which is more of a budget model, so to speak, still has the awesome doors. We do have some controls here as well for the tonneau cover here in the back. You're not really going to be using these buttons all that much. We do have the Club Sport seats here. This is a little bit more of a sporty seat than what we saw when I reviewed the 750S. This is a one-piece seat. You get a tilt function here, so it kind of tilts the seat either way like this, so not as much adjustability, but it is still a pretty comfortable seat, I should say, even though it is very thin and doesn't look like it would be all that comfortable. Now, you do get lumbar here for about $1,200. That is additional extra on this Club Sport seat. If you don't want these seats, McLaren does offer a comfort seat here on this car. I have not tried it. I believe it's similar to what's in the 750S, but if you are a sportier driver, you'll probably really like this Club Sport seat. We do have the Bowers & Wilkins sound system here. You have some of the speakers here behind your head, so really does do a good job of overpowering that engine, which we'll talk about a little bit later if you want to just kind of cruise around and listen to music. Bringing the door to a close is pretty easy. We actually have some nice storage in there, although you kind of have to watch what you put in there considering that the door goes up. We do have soft close doors, as we do on pretty much all McLarens, at least the ones that I've driven. We have an orange start-stop button right here with our very familiar controls for drive, neutral, or reverse, and our hazards right there. But as you noticed, when I pushed that start button, we did not get an engine firing up. That is because the Artura is actually a plug-in hybrid. You can actually control the powertrain here on these new controllers. The 750 has these as well, but I believe the McLaren Artura is actually the car that debuted these. So everything is just at your reach from the steering wheel. So we've got a couple of different modes here for the powertrain. Right now we're in electric mode. If I put it in comfort mode, it is going to favor the electric motors, but use a little bit of that V6 engine that we have. Sport mode is going to fire up the engine pretty much all of the time, and it is going to allow you to charge the hybrid battery, so you don't have to plug this car in, although it is recommended to get kind of the best fuel economy. And then we do have track mode as well for the powertrain. Here on the handling side, this controls kind of the adaptive suspension and the traction control and stuff. We just have comfort, sport, and track. Obviously, there's no electric mode for the handling. I'm going to go ahead and put it back in electric mode. You can see the gauges do change quite a lot as well with those different modes. I tried to put it back into electric so that it would shut the engine off, but it does appear to be leaving the engine on. Maybe it needs to build up a little bit more electricity because we are just running here. The similar 0-button McLaren steering wheel stays here, so they don't overcomplicate this with volume knobs or anything like that. It's not like Ferrari where pretty much all of your controls are on the steering wheel like you would get in an F1 car, but we do have these really nice paddle shifters that are nice and metallic. We also have some cruise control controls down here. We've got our controls for the left side of the screen here. You can have it showing your radio information, your tire information. You can have a little navigation navigation screen. You can just have your basic trip computer. You also have your launch control, variable, drift control, all of those kind of aggressive things that you would expect from a McLaren. In terms of technology, we've got this little HD touchscreen. It does have Apple CarPlay, but not wireless, so it's not the quickest of units, although it does seem to be a little bit less laggy than the 750S. This functions as our volume knob and our home button if we just give that a click, so I do like that there is a nice volume knob there. Definitely not the best infotainment, but it is worlds better from what you used to get in a McLaren, and the fact that it has CarPlay makes it perfectly livable to me. We do have a wireless phone charger behind it right here. I haven't had a huge amount of time to test that out, but it is in a decent space where you can grab the phone quite easily. We also have these nice little grooves on either side of the shifter, perfect to set a phone right here, so you can have your phone very closely in hand, although you probably should be focused more on driving than your phone in a car like this. And then we do have a single cup holder here with a little bit of storage here in this armrest with our USB and USB-C ports. Not a huge amount of storage here in this cabin, but it is a decent amount of time. I did mention that the roof goes up very quickly. We do also have this little sliding window here. I do like that you can kind of put that up if you want to be a little bit more cocooned. The button is right here for the roof. I'll show it to you on the outside because we've got to talk about the electrochromic roof, which is going to be an optional extra here on the Artura Spider. I believe it's about $9,500. You click a button and it goes from tinted to clear. You can get this on the 750S Spider as well. This is a must-have option. It is just so cool to be able to have a little bit of light, but without going full convertible. And then when you're driving around, this is dark enough that it doesn't really bother you, even if it is a very sunny day. And last but not least, I just want to point to the fact that this is a little bit more livable than something like the 750S Spider. We do have blind spot monitoring in those mirrors. We also have lane keep assist and departure warning. So we have a lot more kind of safety functions, cross traffic alert, roadside recognition, more stuff than you would get in other supercars, including ones from McLaren. So in terms of livability, this might be McLaren's best car right now. All right, now let's get behind the wheel of the 2025 McLaren Artura Spider and open the taps on this 690 horsepower supercar. We're gonna take a bend first, and then are you ready to hear the fury? Ready? Oh, I guess there's really not that much fury. So I'm kind of joking because, of course, this is a hybrid supercar. Sound familiar? Yep, it's pretty similar to the old McLaren P1 hypercar, except now instead of a bunch of electric motors and a twin-turbo V8, we now have McLaren's first twin-turbo V6, a 3-liter unit. Power with the electric motor is 690 horsepower and 531 pound-feet of torque. And it's interesting because that is actually an increase from the original Artura Coupe that came out just a little while ago. That produced 671 horsepower. They actually gave it a power upgrade, and you can actually get that power upgrade if you bought last year's Coupe model. So don't feel that McLaren just like suckered you out of extra power if you didn't get the Spider and you got the Coupe. They will give you that extra power upgrade for free, which is kind of a nice deal. Now, the electric motor in this car is not super duper powerful. It's 94 horsepower and 166 pound-feet of torque running on the rear axle alone. We do not have all-wheel drive on this car, so this is not one of those all-wheel drive systems like the Corvette E-Ray has, where you have an electric motor on the front giving you all-wheel drive, so it's not really like the Acura NSX either. And with only 94 horsepower, you can expect that the performance is not going to be neck-breaking while you're driving in electric mode, which we can control here. So when I go ahead and floor it, 45, it really doesn't like move that much. But what I do appreciate is that it let me go full throttle and hold it there without kicking on the gasoline engine. It knew I wanted to stay in electric that whole time, and I do appreciate that because that is something that not a lot of plug-in hybrids are able to do. And while we're mentioning that this is a plug-in hybrid, not a regular hybrid like the E-Ray, we should talk a little bit about what you can do with the electric performance. So we've got a 7.4 kilowatt hour battery. That's going to enable about a 21-mile range. I wish I could tell you how accurate that is, but I had to do my filming on the same day that I had this car delivered, so I'm not 100% sure if that's accurate. It might be a little bit more, it might be a little bit less. I tend to lean that you might be able to do a little bit more than 21 miles depending on how you drive. And there's two ways that you can go ahead and recharge that. On a level 2 home charger, you can get a full recharge in about 2.5 hours. It'll be a lot slower if you're just doing it on a level 1 outlet, but if you have the money for this car, you can probably have the money to install a regular 240 volt outlet. Or you can actually put this car into either sport or track mode, and that's going to give you a couple of options on how to charge it. You can charge it to like 80%. You can actually charge it to 100% as well, and it actually charges it really quick. But I think that's enough of charging and driving with under 100 horsepower. I think we might as well put the car into its sportiest settings. Let's go ahead and go into track mode. We're going to go track mode for the handling and track mode for the powertrain, because we've got to feel what 690 horsepower actually feels like in the McLaren Artura. We've got launch mode in this car that should get us from 0 to 60 in just 3 seconds flat. Launch mode, super easy. Foot on the brake, foot on the gas. Let go. Oh, there we go. Little bit of slip off the line, but whoa! Oh, wow. You almost caught me swearing there. It doesn't feel unbelievably ridiculous off the line. Like, it doesn't throw you back in your seat. It manages the grip really well to try and get you the best traction. But then once it hooks up, which it hooks up incredibly well, I think even better than the 750S that I drove just a few weeks ago. Oh my gosh. Then the power, the delivery is so on point. I mean, honestly, I just drove the 750S, which is a lot more powerful than this car, but I don't know if the power delivery on this car really feels all that much lesser, because you have that electric motor just giving you the thrust. Even when the transmission is doing its thing and changing gears, you never feel a gap in the power delivery. It's pretty incredible. I think honestly, now we're turned around, let's try and do another launch control here. We've still got track mode, everything engaged. All right, foot on the brake, foot on the gas, and here we go. Whoa! God, it just manages the slip so well. Oh my God. The 8-speed transmission, which is interesting because this is a different transmission than they've ever used before. All of their V8 cars use a 7-speed twin clutch box. This is a new 8-speed, and I don't know if the shifts are quite as quick. Maybe I'm imagining that they're like a fraction of a fraction slower, but oh, it's still as good as you could really want. Clicky, nice metal paddles here as well. It is a really, really good transmission. We're gonna go full manual mode here. Not gonna do a launch, we're just gonna kind of get off the line here. Oh yes, the downshifts, oh, so crisp. They just hit so well. The upshifts do kick you when you're kind of off throttle. When you're doing like a full acceleration launch, it almost feels CVT smooth. The gears are coming so quickly and so without disruption that it really feels like I'm not even going through a gear at all. And that's extremely impressive. I do mean that it feels like a CVT in a very good way, not a bad way. Now, if I were to keep my foot planted for a little bit longer than I did, after 0 to 60 in just 3 seconds, you'll hit 124 miles an hour in just 8.4 seconds. You can get to 186 miles an hour in just over 21 seconds. You'll hit a 205 mile an hour top speed, which is only like a mile an hour or two slower than the 750S. And this car will complete the quarter mile in the 10s. You should get about 10.8 seconds in the quarter mile. So this might be the quote unquote baby McLaren, but there is nothing infantile about its performance. And speaking of this being the baby of the range, I do like that it is a little bit smaller than the 750S, and you feel that from in here. It doesn't feel quite as long. It is still very wide though. McLaren's steering has just always been among the best. Like, there's really, I don't think anybody on the market, maybe Ferrari, that's doing steering quite as well as McLaren is right now. The brake pedal doesn't feel quite as firm. You don't need to slam it like you do on some previous McLarens that I've driven. I kind of like that, actually. Kind of weird on other McLarens. But the handling is absolutely impressive. We still have the proactive dampening control with 90% quicker response than the Coupe when that first came out. So it's doing a really magnificent job managing the ride. These sort of farm back roads that I'm on right now are not the smoothest paved. I'm back here just because it's quiet. These are definitely not like buttery glass smooth roads. And even in the track setting, I don't feel like the car is beating me up. I do feel like there's a little bit less sound deadening in here, a la something like the McLaren 600 LT. So I do hear the little tick, 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 pitter patter of little stones and stuff as they get picked up by the tires. I didn't notice that as much in the 750S, although that had a lot more engine noise and stuff like that going on. But it does sound like this car is a little more raw, a little less insulated than the 750S is, if you like that. I mean, honestly, I would say that the 750 is definitely the more exciting car, but the way that this thing gets around a corner is so fun. It's so spry and enjoyable. The engine may be down 2 cylinders, but it still sounds pretty good at full tap. It has a very unique engine note that I'm struggling to come up with like an equivalent to. I'm trying to think of what engine this sounds like, and I'm really kind of just drawing a blank, which is pretty rare for me. I can usually at least come up with one thing that it sounds like. It sounds good at the top end. I really do like it. And then if I go ahead and tap a couple of buttons here and get us back into comfort mode to shut it up, the thing that I like is when you're just driving around at kind of normal traffic speeds and the engine is kind of at idle, it's a lot quieter than the 750S's V8. And that's not even anything to do with it being in hybrid mode and shutting the engine off, which is great. You can go full silent if you really want to, but the buzziness of the engine is way down with this V6, meaning that this is just so much more of a pleasant car to be in for multiple hours if you're doing a lot of highway cruising or you're just kind of driving around and not being spirited with it. So I think in that capacity, if I wanted a McLaren to drive a lot, I mean, obviously there's the new GTS, which I haven't driven yet, but I did love the previous McLaren GT. But this might be your best bet. You can cruise around silently, even when the engine is on. It's really not that loud. This might be the quietest supercar that I've driven in a really long time, if not ever, not even counting the fact that if I tap one more time, now the engine goes away altogether and it's completely silent, which is a really neat party trick. Now, of course, I have been driving it with the roof up at the moment. It is a little bit chilly here today in Florida. It is in the 40s actually, but I think I would be doing you a huge disservice if I didn't at least put the roof down, which can be done very quickly at speeds of up to 31 miles an hour. And now we're cruising with the top down. This is just such a cool experience. I love the fact that I can now get off the line, floor it here. It just makes a little bit of an electric motor whine, nothing too crazy there, but I can cruise around silently with the roof up. Then I can go ahead and put everything into sport mode and be a little bit wild. They fixed the exhaust a little bit. They changed, I believe, the shape of it when they designed the Spider so that it sounds a little bit better. Oh, and oh boy, it sounds good. It doesn't have that full wail that the V8 and the 750 does, but it is still a really nice sounding engine. And if you're gonna go for an Artura, why not go for the Spider? The looks are pretty much the same. You get the glass roof with the electrochromic action if you want it. It weighs 131 pounds more than the coupe, which you're not gonna feel. It's not gonna change the 0 to 60 time at all. So you might as well just enjoy it as a convertible. And the only reason that I would say maybe you shouldn't get the Artura is when you consider the price. So let's go ahead and pull over and chat about it. So that's gonna wrap up our time with the 2025 McLaren Artura Spider. And let's talk about the pricing here, because you're gonna be spending about $254,000 if you want the Artura Coupe. The Spider is gonna cost you quite a bit extra, about $273,000. However, our tester has quite a lot of options on it. Once you add the paint and the wheels and the stuff on the interior and the electrochromic roof for $9,500, you're talking about a $345,000 supercar, which, you know, I mean, maybe what's the difference between 270 and 345, but it is quite expensive. In fact, the McLaren 750S Spider that I drove recently, I believe the as-tested price of that was about $380,000. So for about 40 grand more, you could get the much more powerful V8 powered 750S. And I really think the difference between those cars is kind of just based on your personality. The 750S is a hardcore monster. It has so much power, it sounds great, it obviously looks great, has a little bit of a bigger cabin, but the thing that I like about this is that it has the ability to be a little bit more subtle. This car loves to cruise, especially when you put it into electric mode. It still looks, I think, to an outsider, just as good as the 750S. You'll draw just as much attention. You just maybe won't get as much admiration for the exhaust note, because the V8 does definitely sound better than McLaren's new twin-turbo V6. But if you want a car that looks like this, but is actually really comfortable to drive around, this might be the best option. The only reason I say might is because McLaren does have another car in its range that you might want to consider, the new McLaren GTS. Now, I've driven the previous generation GT. That car was about as comfortable as this, rode really well, has more practicality too, because you get a little bit of storage area in the back, although you do lose the open top. You do not have the ability to get a GTS Spider. And the thing is, I do think that this looks a lot better than the GTS. I think it is just a sharper, handsomer car. I believe the GTS is actually a little bit cheaper than this, and you still do get a V8 engine. So it's just something to consider if you're cross-shopping all of the various McLaren cars. But in my personal opinion, I think the Artura Spider might be the sweet spot. It really is all you need. No, it's not as quick as the 750S, but honestly, in my testing, it was only about a 1/10 of a second slower to 60 miles an hour. It's much more livable as a daily driver and comfortable. And honestly, if it were my money, I'd want the car that would urge me to drive it the most. And if I want to be comfortable, and that is gonna get me in the car more, that is the car that I would probably buy. But let me know in the comments, would you buy the Artura Spider over a 750S Spider? Would you just spend the extra money? Or would you maybe go for the McLaren GTS? Or would you go for something entirely different? Wait for the new Lamborghini Temerario, or get something from the Prancing Horse Ferrari brand, if you can even get one of those. I want to hear from you. As always, leave a comment below. Please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and ring that notification bell to be alerted of our latest videos. And I'll see you next time.